My name is Yanira Villanueva, and on behalf of FIBA, I'd like to welcome you to today's FIBA webinar entitled Improving Your Emotional Intelligence, Tips and Practical Case Studies. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I know some of you guys are probably watching us right now live on Facebook and on YouTube. On YouTube, we post all recordings that we have permission to post, so we encourage you to follow us on YouTube. You can look us up as FIBA Bankers. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay up to date on all FIBA activities. As we get ready to begin our webcast, we'd also like to invite you to our next conference, which is in October, which is our CELAI's conference on bank security. It will be taking place at the Trump National Doral. And the theme for this year's conference is actual digital transformation and cyber challenges. To all those that are watching us, we're offering you a special discount of $100. Just send us the discount code to FIBA@FIBA.net, FIBA webinars, and you'll receive a special discount to attend our next conference. Just a little housekeeping before we get started for those of you that are actually attending today's webinar. If you have any questions during the webinar, at the very end of the webinar, we're going to have a 15-minute Q&A. So we encourage you to send us your questions at any time, and we'll collect them and address them at the end of today's webinar. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Monica Hernandez. Monica is the Managing Director of the Client Academy, a leading HR consultancy specialized in developing client engagement and leadership skills for the wealth management sector. Monica has 22 years of experience in trust-based client relationships, mainly in the banking and consulting sectors. She holds a psychology degree from Cambridge University, an MBA from London Business School, and an International Business Administration from la Universidad Pontificia de Comillas in Madrid. Prior to retraining as a psychologist in 2003, she was a senior manager in the financial sector practice at KPMG and a banker at Barclays Bank. Based in London with offices in Madrid and Panama, the Client Academy works globally with clients such as Lloyds Bank, Santander Private Banking, TD Direct Investing, SunTrust Bank, Sedfinco, Banco Panama, Metro Bank, and Intercam Securities. Monica, the audience is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Yanira, for the introduction and also for inviting me once again. It's always a pleasure to come to Miami and to work with FIBA, even though we've got a very rainy afternoon. Okay, so some of you may have attended a previous webinar I did for FIBA in March on emotional intelligence. That one described a model of 15 attributes of emotional intelligence, and we were trying to understand all of those attributes. Today we're going to take a more practical approach based around 3 situations at work, which I find where most of my clients struggle in one way or another to apply emotional intelligence, which is about the relationship with themselves, the relationship with others, and the relationship to change. If you haven't watched the other webinar, I believe that FIBA, when they send you the recording for this one, is going to include a link to see the other one because they are complementary. Okay, so let's get started then. Just a brief introduction on the Client Academy. We are a British company, a consultancy. We do training, coaching, and facilitation to improve client relationships. And we work with 2 sets of clients. It can be external clients, normally when there are complicated client relationships that are based on trust. They are built over the long term, and they are normally selling a complex service. So it can be things like private banking or corporate banking or professional services. We also work with consultants and lawyers. Or another set of client relationships where we tend to work quite often is internally the departments that are specialists and they can act as consultants to the rest of the organization. For instance, we work with the IT department or HR or finance or compliance, how they can apply their specialist knowledge to the particular situation that the rest of the company has, acting like an internal consultant. We've got 3 offices. The main one is in London. I myself come from Spain, even though most of my professional career has been international with a base in London. I now live in Madrid, where there's the second office, and in 2013, we opened an office in Panama, from where we conduct all the Latin American business. These are some of our clients. Still about 70% of our clients tend to be in the financial sector because of my background, and quite a lot of them in the wealth management subsector of the financial services. We also work with professional services, as you can see, Boston Consulting Group in consulting, Morgan & Morgan, who are lawyers, lawyers in Panama. The Cabinet Office, the British government have a set of communications consultants whom we have trained in consulting skills. In the UK, we also work with Lloyds quite a lot. In Spain, we've worked with FIBA, with Canal de Isabel II. We've trained everybody who deals with clients face-to-face. In Panama, with Atenza, Copa, and Movistar. So let's look at our emotional intelligence model, which is around 3 relationships at work. The first relationship that we look at it is, am I good enough? The graph is actually, I've just realized, is still in Spanish. It's about self-dialogue. So this would be the relationship with yourself, your self-dialogue. Then we've got the relationship with others, others on which we depend to obtain results. So the key question there is, can I trust them? So it's about dealing with dependency and the relationship with others. And finally, the relationship with the whole organization and the world, will it work? And that is the relationship with change, whether we can adapt to change. A quick reminder of what we mean by emotional intelligence. What it means is the capacity to read and manage our emotions and the emotions of others so that we can guide our behavior towards the best result in a given situation. That is, there is some place that we want to go. Then based on that destination that we've got in mind, then we look at it, what is the best way to act that is going to get me there? An analogy I often use is that emotional intelligence is a little bit like sailing. If you imagine that each of us is a boat in the middle of the ocean and we're trying to get somewhere, the sea is our circumstances, and they can be more favorable if the sea or the ocean is calm, or it can be, or the seas can be rough. Obviously, it's going to be more difficult to manage the boat when the seas are rough. The winds are our emotions. So, to be able to still get to our destination when the winds are trying to derail us, we need emotional intelligence, which are the sails. So through emotional intelligence, we get hold of the sails, we control them so that we steer the boat towards where we want to go. Just a little anecdote. In 1983, I don't know if many of you were around, I was 13 at the time. Spain had a catastrophical performance in the Eurovision Song Contest. I don't even know whether here in Miami you follow this thing, but it's this annual contest where everybody from Europe sends somebody to sing, and Spain always does very poorly. But still, that year in 1983, it got absolutely 0 points. It was terrible, and it was with a song called "Who Steers My Boat?" ¿Quién maneja mi barca? If you want to Google it, if you want to find it on YouTube, it's just look Eurovision Spain 1983, and you'll see what an awful song it was. But this was all about. This song was about a lady not being in control of her boat, basically, and wondering who's steering this boat and why is it drifting and why is it not going where I want to go. So I always, when I think about emotional intelligence, I just think of. I think of that song, and if you want to laugh a little bit, I do encourage that you look at it in YouTube. Maybe even I can include the link later on.
And just a follow-up email.
Yeah, it's kind of is the worst combination of flamenco and pop that you have ever listened to. Okay, so let's look at the first situation then, the relationship with ourselves. So the key dilemma here that we face is, am I good enough? I think at some point, everybody, even the most confident person, must have had one moment in their lives when they were wondering, am I good enough to do this? And may have been assailed by bouts of lack of confidence, self-doubt about their skills, strong self-criticism, or shame. So it's this idea that somehow this is all an act and that somebody's going to find you out sooner or later. It can be what they call the imposter syndrome. It's like in the Wizard of Oz where you know, there's this little man pretending to be the Wizard of Oz. Okay, let's look at the context. These are the people, when I find my clients in coaching and also when I'm doing emotional intelligence courses, I find that often these things are not talked about. There's a bit of a stigma about admitting at work that you're having some of these struggles, that you struggle perhaps sometimes with the relationship with yourself or the relationship with others or the relationship with change. Because we tend to say, well, being successful is being confident and being very good at relationships and changing, always changing. But I got trained in emotional intelligence about 6 years ago, and I've been really amazed at the amount of interest and the amount of people who, they may not say it publicly in the courses, but then they come and talk to me later, or they talk to me when we're doing the coaching sessions. And I think that these three dilemmas are quite pervasive, to different degrees, of course. And they are pervasive with people that are even very successful. I mean, sometimes I've found people with who score very low on self-regard or self-perception, but they are very successful. In fact, some of their success comes out of how hard they are on themselves to push them forward to achieve ever greater things. It tends to be people whose self-esteem comes more from the outside than from the inside. So they say, well, I'm good if I achieve this, or if I get this target, or I'll be happy when, and they always have got the next challenge, and they won't be happy until they get that next challenge. So they do meet objectives and they are successful, but the negative connotation of it, therefore, is not always on what they achieve, but in the internal experience, in the how they achieve it. Because meeting those objectives sometimes comes with very negative emotions, with fear of failure, with an excruciating perfectionism sometimes, with imposter syndrome, and with very negative self-dialogue that propels them forward, but with a very negative experience. After achieving a challenge, they tend to move to the next one without really celebrating the successes. The cycle of fear begins almost immediately after they have finished achieving the previous thing. And in the last few years, I have experienced an increase in this type of situation. I just think that, social media and also very flexible companies, where many times you are part of different teams, you are part of projects, so you feel very exposed. I have increasingly seen executives who feel very exposed and very alone, and also the inability to switch off. Before, you used to be able to leave work and there was less work to be taken home, but now we are available all the time. Therefore, in those situations, if your internal support is weak, if you rely a lot more on external support, but you're alone for a lot of the time, if your internal support that you give yourself is not very strong, then people are going to suffer. To find a comparison, an analogy that might work about the internal experience of these people, think about when you learned to swim, and in two different situations. One would be like the children on the left, so it's children who are clearly enjoying the water. they have learned to swim with or without difficulty, I don't know, but they reach a point in which they genuinely enjoy the water. And it's not only about getting to the other side of the swimming pool or getting to an island in the sea, but actually enjoying the process of it. Whereas if we see the child on the right, he's struggling, he has got the armbands, and there he's very exposed in a difficult swimming situation where the shore is a long way off. That child is probably going to get there, but the experience is going to be one more ridden with difficulties and with fear than the children on the left. So a lot of the times, these are variables that are under our control. You know, how deep we decide to go, how prepared we are, how hard we are with ourselves in our own self-voice, self-dialogue. Those things are completely under our control, and they can be the difference between having a relatively pleasurable experience or having a very stressful experience. Self-doubt and shame, they've got a positive origin. Almost all of the things that we're going to talk about today have had a positive origin. Self-doubt is a way of doing daily gymnastics to do better, to improve. If you doubt a little bit what you're doing, it's thinking, well, perhaps I could have done it better. Perhaps there's something else I can do. Perhaps there's something more I can add. So it's the basis of self-improvement. In fact, it's the basis of all the improvements. If we think about lean, I don't know if any of your companies is involved in the continuous improvement. Lean is exactly about that. It's about, okay, now that this is working, what else can I do to make it better? So this would be like a lean philosophy applied to yourself. And also shame is a natural response when we've made a mistake. It's what allows us we feel bad, to force us to apologize, is to say, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, so that then you can repair the relationship. So evolutionarily, from evolution, we needed shame to be able to repair relationships and to feel that we have broken some social rule. The problem becomes when self-doubt and shame happen too often, and also when there's no objective basis for them. So you are a very high achiever, but you still continue having a lot of self-doubt. Your previous achievements are not insulating you from the self-doubt or from the shame. Or when we tend to apologize too readily before really analyzing what has been the objective basis of it. So if we think about a continuous line, a continuum where at the one end we've got full shame, it would be the feeling that, okay, I'm a disaster, I'm no good. And at the other end, it would be I'm perfect, which would be veering on arrogance, of course. And then in the middle, we've got towards the right, towards the arrogance, but not quite, we just have self-confidence, which is really when we all aspire to be. Being self-confident, but not veering on arrogance, and still maintaining enough self-doubt to be able to apologize or to see somebody else's point of view. And then going towards shame, then we've got self-doubt. So depending on how often these things are in your life, then you would put across whatever you find yourself. Okay, so how do we recommend that if this is a challenge that you've got, we're going to share with you some things that I recommend my clients. So the first thing is that we need to change the perspective, because it's clear that the sense of reality is not there. Somehow the negative appraisal of yourself has been blown out of proportion. And we need to bring back, it's as if the balance has been tipped too much to the negative side, and there's not enough in the positive side in your mind, although there probably is in the outside world. So you need to bring some of that reality into your mind. These feelings of helplessness, these feelings of inadequacy tend to come from the animal, irrational part of us. I often use the model from the psychiatrist Stephen Peters. He's a British psychiatrist who works with elite sportsmen, and he's got a very good book called The Chimp Paradox. It's also translated into Spanish, La Paradoja del Chimpancé. And it talks about that we've got a human within ourselves, but also we've got a chimp. My own take on it is that we're a little bit like Tarzan. We're human, but we were raised in the jungle, and we've got still, when we hear the call of the wild, we still, sometimes the animal comes out, the chimp or the gorilla or the monkey, and that gorilla can be aggressive. I think that we can see itself very clearly when people are driving, then we see their chimps and their gorillas coming out, but also it can be quite catastrophic. It can be the kind of animal that tells you, oh, you are no good, you are going to mess up, you are going to do it badly. Freud, long time ago, even, he was talking about 3 parts to us. We had the ego, which would be the part of the human, and then he talked about the superego, who is this controlling, very critical voice, and then the it, which is the irrational animal part of us. So I suppose this irrational animal, but also the very self-critical that has lost all sense of perspective, those are things that we need to bring back to objectivity. So we need to argue with a negative voice using evidence of previous achievements, and also simply learning to discover, okay, who is talking to me now? Is it Monica? Or is it my chimp, or my superego, my it, or however you want to call it? Is it my animal? In fact, when I do long emotional intelligence courses, I ask the participants to imagine this animal and to draw it, and it's amazing what they do. Sometimes it's a monkey, but sometimes it's a bear, or sometimes it's a troll. We've got Chewbacca. We've had the Lake Ness monster, we've had their mothers-in-laws, their fathers, you name it. The key thing is that we learn to recognize that voice and saying, it's not me, and therefore I'm not going to listen to it. Then the body language. The saying, fake it till you make it? Well, it's not fake it till you make it, but there's enough evidence now, there's some experiments that is fake it till you become it. I recommend that you watch Amy Cadditt's TED Talk on the links between the body language and the mind. It's a wonderful 20-minute talk where she really shows that if we change our posture, we adopt a more confident posture even just for 2 minutes, our testosterone goes up, which means that we feel more confident, and also our cortisol, which is the hormone of the stress, comes down, and also people feel a bit more risky, and they bet more. So do have a look at it, because your body language can change your mind. And finally, it's about anticipating obstacles, really identifying the obstacles and being prepared. It's not just a positive affirmation that I am good, I hug myself, I love myself. If those help you, then by all means do it. But I think these days in positive psychology, we've got enough science to back up that if we use a bit of our analytical mind to be prepared to really identify patterns and to identify then strategies, let's say when this happens, then I'm going to do that, it really helps. Okay, so we're going to, do we have a poll?
Yes, we do actually.
So I'm just going to ask you,
On the plus, if you want, I can.
yeah, the plus. Let's just see, on the plus, am I not?
No, you're there. Select, drop down.
Jot that. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, how many of you identify yourself with this situation number 1? This is anonymous, so we're not going to know who you are. We're just going to know the percentages. So I'm going to launch the question. It will appear on your screens. So you just vote I do or I do not, and we'll be able to see to what extent this is an issue. In the previous webinar that we did in Spanish, it was about 3/4 yes, 1/4 no. About 75% yes and 25% no. Okay, I think it's round about the same. This is bang on 75-25. But I think people are still voting. Okay, people are still voting.
If you want to
Okay, yeah, I think it's about 75. At the moment it's 74 I do, 76 I do not. So more or less the same. I mean, some of the situations you're going to find that they are more relevant than others. Okay, so let's move on to situation number 2 then. So that's the relationship with others when we depend on them for our results. Because of the way that the modern organizations are designed, it's very rare that you've got the type of job where you can do it all by yourself. If you're a manager, you probably need to delegate. If you're not a manager, you are probably into several projects, task forces, teams. You're in a matrix organization, maybe depending on 2 different bosses. So that actually creates a need for dependency. We have created organizations where dependency is endemic and is needed. So we need to have deep relationships with one another. In fact, that very dependency is what is the reason why people tend to hire us. So it's good that it exists. The problem is that if you personally are if you're the type of person who tends to feel most comfortable when you've got full control over things, that's the way you've operated, then this might be a challenge, because you may feel vulnerable because of that dependency, you may mistrust others, you may have a feeling of lack of power and also a frustration because there are different standards of quality of work. So what is the context I normally find in my clients in those situations? They tend to be very independent and very responsible people. They tend to be involved in this methodical or specialist type of work. In banking, I have often seen them in IT or in finance, where they have needed to devote large chunks of their lives to be on their own trying to spot problems with something very, very technical. They struggle sometimes with the delegation, and they tend to prefer written communication because they like to leave a paper trail. Okay, I want to make sure that I said that on such and such time. But as we were saying before, nowadays it's much harder to rely simply on your own results. You need to work on relationships and have tact, as well as having personal mastery. A comparison of how these people may feel, how they would like to feel or how they feel when they are in control is a little bit like when you play Risk. Do you know that game, Risk? It was plotting world domination. So you've got a map of the world and you create your army strategies and your naval strategy, and you deploy your forces. So everything is laid out in front of you. How they actually feel when they depend on results on other people is like this man on the right. He's sitting on a rail track, reading the newspaper, not realizing that the train might come any moment and run him over. And the key thing here is that it's not even himself who put himself on the track. Somebody else has put them there. So this is the feeling that they often have. It's like somebody has put me there and a train is going to come and I don't know where it's going to come from. But like in the previous side, there is a positive side to it. Maybe this is people who felt vulnerable early in life. Maybe they depended on some people, but they couldn't. But they found that if you depend on people and they are not there for you, therefore dependency is bad. It may be tinged in their minds that dependency is bad. Or they may be hyper-responsible children. I have found many of them who maybe are older siblings or from quite an early age, they were told, okay, you are responsible, you are in charge, and therefore they have a tendency for taking care of things, taking responsibilities from others and taking care of them themselves, because if they don't do that, things remain unsolved. So very often they have received a positive reinforcement that when they take that extra responsibility and that extra vigilance, then good things happen. The negative effect of that, when it happens too much, of course, is perhaps too much work and unnecessary effort. And also, I think it can threaten teamwork. Because if you're criticizing a lot the rest of your team because they haven't done something, then it can create a self-fulfilling prophecy. All right, so we've got the continuum like last time. We've got on the one hand total dependency, like I don't like doing things alone, or I can't do things alone. Versus on the opposite end of the spectrum, total independence and control. Like I can't count on anyone. I have to do it all myself if I want to do it right. And then moving towards control, it would be works well with others, but has a tendency to mistrust. And going towards dependency, it would be works well with others, but tends to trust, before being proven, otherwise they tend to trust. So where are you in that continuum? And are you happy with where you are? Is it bringing you the results that you want, or would it be worthwhile changing a bit? If you conclude that it's worthwhile changing things a bit, then let's look at some tips for improving that relationship with others. And I've chosen this image because this is all about this sense of empathy, and we are a team. So the first thing is developing empathy, and the easiest way to develop empathy is simply asking people for their version of things. Just simply, before launching onto assuming what has happened or laying blame on anybody, it would be simply just asking, okay, what is your version of what has happened? What has been your experience of what we have done together, or the way we have worked together? Or this seems to have gone wrong. How was it for you? How did you experience it? And then you can contrast the two versions. Another way of bringing empathy into the mixture is, if you don't want to confront the people that you are collaborating with, perhaps there's somebody else, a colleague, that has got a different personality or a different point of view, so you can ask them, look, this is happening. Before I launch the conclusions, how would you understand what has happened? The second thing is to foster autonomy in the other people. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we feel we can't trust on people, and if we take on additional responsibilities, we are reinforcing to them that you will always take that extra responsibility. So you're making them less responsible, not more. You would think that by doing that, they would feel terribly guilty and they wouldn't do it again. But the opposite tends to happen. So we really recommend that you foster autonomy, and an easy way of doing that is perhaps not getting involved in the how they're going to do it. You still need to lay the ground, okay, what needs to be achieved, but keep it open how they're going to achieve it. Because people that have got more autonomy on their work, they're going to feel much more committed to doing it. Whereas if they feel that they're being very controlled and you've laid everything that they need to do, then they're probably going to wiggle out of their responsibility. Which leads us to the third tip, which is putting the team ahead of your own reputation. Sometimes when clients tell me about these challenges, one of the things that they find most difficult is they know that their bit was done and was done well. They know who has done badly, and they have a really hard time not blaming somebody else and playing along with the team. So really here is crucial that you take a stance of collaboration, Because if this is a relationship that is going to be continuing over time, and you are being too critical and too blamey at the beginning, then the next time they are going to be very reluctant to get involved, or they are going to try to lay a lot of blame on you. So really thinking as a team and taking part responsibility and saying, okay, well, this hasn't worked. They may be things that each of us has done that has created this. So let's talk about it, and between the two of us, let's try and solve it. Before we move on to situation 3, can we pull situation 2? So
Yeah,
relationships, the relationship with others. You do it?
Yes, I can. Okay, alright, so that's not it. How many of you identify with?
Can I trust them?
Okay.
Can I trust them? So the issues of trust and dependency, the question should be appearing on your screens now. I think we're still around the 3/4 versus 1/4, 75% versus 25%, which is consistent as well with what we've seen previously in the Spanish webinar. Okay, so we're going to leave it 77 versus 23%. So just 1 percentage more than the than the previous question. Right, let's continue with situation number 3. So situation number 3 is about the relationship with the world at large and with change. The way we interact and react with the world is largely based on change. It's adaptation to change. The way we have evolved as the human race, evolution is about change. So the way that companies keep on changing and reorganizing is to react to change in the outside world. Basically, all we have at the moment in banking related to compliance is reacting to new dangers. Even you were talking, Janira, about the conference on cybersecurity.
Yeah.
That is reacting to changes in the market. So when this is a challenge for some people, is because that question, will this work, or rather the feeling that it's not going to work, that it's going to get derailed, provokes very strong emotions of fear, of uncertainty, of lack of control, and of helplessness. So let's see what is the context. So the people who struggle with this tend to be people who prioritize stability, security, and also they tend to like routines. And it's a strength of them to have these things. Very often their work is better because they've got their predisposition. They often do detailed work, but they have to identify risks. In banking, I often find people who work in risk management, in compliance, in finance, and because at work they are identifying risks all the time and thinking all the horrible things that could happen, they have a hard time being very positive and optimistic when any other change is presented to them. Also, it can be people for whom change is a painful process of personal turmoil. It has cost them quite a lot of time to achieve a sense of equilibrium, of creating a routine, something that works for them. So they obviously understand, these professionals who have changed before and they will continue to change in the future, but they feel often that change has to be better explained and that organizations or people should be better prepared, should have the tools to be better prepared, and they often feel that some change is pointless. So for them, they could be optimistic, but it has to be based on facts. They're not going to be a too idealistic, optimistic person. Comparing the analogy of how they feel, the two situations would be, we compare the feeling of being in a roller coaster where we willingly relinquish control. We pay good money to feel a little bit out of control. So you go up, you go down, your stomach gets upside down, but somehow it is controllable and it's enjoyable, versus simply throwing yourself into the void head first. So that feeling of free falling is how they often feel when change is being championed without too much explanation and without too much preparation. There is obviously a positive side, like everything else, to this difficulty in adapting to change. Normally, this is people who their success has been based on the ability to see threats and risks when others don't. And they want a prior thoughtful plan before changing. Colleagues tend to call them pessimists, but they don't think of themselves as pessimists, but rather as realists. And if we look at the continuum, on the one end of the spectrum, we've got avoiding change, like I try to do things always the same whenever I can, versus at the other end of the spectrum, it's almost impossible to me to do things exactly the same. I seek changes because if I don't change, I'm bored. Then going towards the change for change's sake, we tend to have motivation to change that is positive. Oops, sorry, I've gone back. Aspirational is like, I change because I want to be better, I want a better outcome. And going towards avoidance of change, it would be the motivation to change is based on things that I want to avoid. The key here is going out of your comfort zone, but in a way that feels, this seems like a paradox, but in a way that feels a little bit comfortable. So you're going out of the comfort zone, but it's not completely panic. So you are in the stretch zone, you are venturing outside of your comfort zone, but you're not totally in the risk or the danger zone. Some people like to be in the danger zone. They like that feeling of kind of barely being above water. But if this adaptation to change is a bit of a challenge for you, we often work in saying, okay, if one area of your life, of your work is changing, let's see what else can we do around the rest of your life, of your work, to give you security and to give you comfort, so that you are not doing too many things at the same time. So if you're being asked to change a lot at work, perhaps this is not the time to, I don't know, move house or get divorced or something major. How to improve this adaptation to change? The first thing is to, rather than simply positive affirmations, is to deploy your strengths of analysis to change. But what I mean by that is not simply airing all your concerns and leaving it there. That is what psychologists tend to call rumination. This comes from the cows, that they take some grass and then they ruminate. So they just continue, it goes around and around and around. And in psychology, for instance, people who are depressed, they tend to have that tendency of getting into those kind of negative cycles where they start thinking about all the negative things and things that could go wrong, and they just keep on going round and round and round, a little bit like a washing machine. So if you find yourself like that, you really need to stop that and apply your analysis and say, okay, let's make a list of all these things that are churning around in my head, but then let's start either applying some reality testing or debating them or finding ways to minimize it. And a lot of that way to minimize it tends to be what is under my control. I don't know if you're familiar with the Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about how just simply thinking about the things that are under our control makes us feel like we can do more. For instance, today is raining. We cannot do much about the rain itself. We cannot magically change the weather here in Miami, but we can carry an umbrella. We can carry an extra pair of shoes that don't get wet. We can have a contingency plan if we know that traffic is going to be very bad, if it's raining, etc. The second part is being realist optimism. That is cultivating an optimism that is based on some objective facts. It doesn't mean just simply having rosy tints, but there is mounting evidence that people who are a little bit optimistic, they've got a bias, but it's a self-fulfilling bias. The more optimistic we feel about things, the more perseverant that we tend to be. So even though you may have a realistic appraisal of the situation, then it's about, okay, how can I maintain a little bit of that realism, but act as if things are going to be slightly better. An analogy I often use is, imagine that you're going to take a photo. And in that photo, I think I used this example in a previous webinar I did on emotional intelligence for FIBA in March. Imagine that you're going to take a photo. As you see a lovely thing, say a sunset, a beautiful sunset, and you also see garbage mound. So you could decide what is going to be in your photo. Both things could be in the photo, or you could take a photo of the beautiful sunset, or you could decide to just focus the zoom just simply on the garbage. This is a voluntary decision. It's something that you decide what you're going to look at. And I suppose what we're talking about is saying, well, I know the garbage is there, but I choose to focus on the sunset, but I'm going to perhaps put a few things in place so that the garbage smell doesn't bother me. So it's not just simply a positive affirmation, but actually doing something about it. And the third thing is looking for ways to support you during change, both internal and external. Internal ways of support, it could be, well, perhaps this is the time that you need to sleep a little bit more, or doing more exercise, or limit the amount of change in the rest of your life. External support, well, through hobbies, through relationships with people. An analogy that can work well there is if you think about children when they are beginning to walk. I mean, normally children tend to walk between 10 months and 18 months. And it doesn't really matter when for their future development. It doesn't matter. It's one of these things. Actually, reading does matter, but walking doesn't. You see some babies that they don't even crawl. They just want to go in the middle of the room and stand up and just fight with the wobbly knees until they can stand. And you see some other children that they need more support. They want to go from mommy to daddy, wobbling a little bit, or they're holding onto furniture, or they perfect crawling first. And everybody finds their own strategy. And I think that when we grow older, we are not as intentional with those strategies as we could be. In fact, many times the very moments where we have to be at our best because a lot is demanded of us is when the exercise, the sleeping, everything else kind of goes out of the window. So it's good to reflect, okay, what has helped me in the past with change and how can I increase that support. And with that, we finish the third part. So let's poll. Okay.
Right on the drop down there. Where's this closed?
Yeah, this is closed. So situation number 3. How many of you identify with situation number 3? I think it should be coming your way. In the previous webinar in Spanish, more people, we had about 80% versus 20% who don't. Well, you English-speaking bunch seem to be able to cope with change better than than the Spanish-speaking audience that we've had before. So at the moment is 67% versus around 80, 81 or 82,
Yeah.
I think that we had in the other one. So at the moment we have 68 you do and 32 this does not apply to you. Well, you may well respond more to one of these three challenges, or two, or three. So let's finish with three key messages. The first one is that the origin of some of these challenges is positive. I mean, you are struggling with these things because there is a big part of you that is positive. This has served you well in the past. So we don't want to throw the baby with the bathwater, but just simply analyzing in which situations is this causing a problem, and it's probably a matter of polishing the diamond rather than completely changing the stone. The second thing is that you need to identify that irrational voice, that chimp, that animal, try and draw it, and try and think, okay, what is this voice that is talking to me? That in terms of relationship with myself is telling me I'm not good enough, in terms of relationship with others is telling me constantly I can't trust them, and in terms of the world and change is telling me that it's not going to work and it is not worth it to change. So you need to start distinguishing when is it me or when is this other person. I mean, I've got my own monkey, she's called Rosita, and throughout the years I've become better at identifying when she's talking to me, and now she doesn't seduce me that much, and now I've got a firmer hold on her. And the third thing is that improving emotional intelligence is possible, but it requires intentionality. That means not simply being swept along, but really taking very conscious decisions and practice. You wouldn't dream, I don't think that you would think that you're going to learn to play the piano without practicing, or sport, that you're going to improve your handicap at golf if you don't practice golf. Well, these skills are exactly the same. It takes time to identify those voices, it takes time to develop the rational skills to debate them. But it's definitely worth it. We are going to be sharing with you the presentation and this recording, and also a one-page summary of some of these techniques with a little bit more explanation on them. And now we've got some time for questions. It is 1 hour webinar followed by 15 minutes of questions. So you can send us the questions by using the tab questions on your menu, on your GoToWebinar menu, or if you prefer to use email, you can send your questions to Yanira, that is Yanira, Yanira at FIBA.net.
Well, Monica, we have one question here. How do you treat an employee who always blames others for their mistakes and has lowered their own productivity overwhelmingly just because of the fact that they don't have time to be assigned new tasks?
Okay, so it is. So how do you treat an employee that is always blaming others? Basically, because so who hasn't got time? Themselves or their boss?
Basically, the person that keeps blaming other people keeps having mistakes, so they have to keep fixing the mistakes that they keep making.
Mistakes, and they don't have time, exactly. So he doesn't get or she doesn't get new tasks. Okay, what we see there is actually somebody with shame, somebody who has got some trouble to admitting and is putting under a defense mechanism. So someone that we have got there, it's funnily enough, we've got a lot of arrogance, but that arrogance is probably masking completely the opposite. I mean, it's as if in this continuum, the ends kind of end up meeting. So it's pretending that they're perfect and it's not their fault and it's somebody else's fault, but really what it is a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism because they've got that shame. So they get too defensive. there's a very good book that I can recommend. It's called "Why Do I Do That," which talks about a lot of the defense mechanisms that we put up, but specifically about this employee. I reckon that what may be happening is that a lot of blame is going along. That perhaps people are blaming this person, him or her, and therefore this person feels in the need to spread the blame around. It's just saying, well, if I throw the ball to the other court, then I'm masking what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So what we need there is that sense of collaboration that we saw. I mean, this person probably has got a problematic relationship with themselves. They probably have got too much arrogance that is masking a sense of shame. And probably what you're finding, it's also a bit of lack of empathy, a lack of autonomy, a lack of thinking as a team. So I would recommend that you focus on these things. First of all, before blaming the person, just simply say, look, this keeps on happening. Mm-hmm. We are a team, let's work together to solve this. You know, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. I mean, often I have found, I can tell you this, this year, I was asked to facilitate a working session in a bank where the salespeople and the risk people had a very problematic relationship, and they blamed each other. So the salespeople blamed the others because they were not doing enough business, and the risk people blamed the salespeople that they were chasing business that just wasn't suitable, and the animosity between them was really high. Plus, there was also an issue of how much they were paid, because the salespeople were paid much more. So the blame going around the room was terrible. So, for instance, at the beginning of that session, what I did is saying, well, okay, we are X number of people here. You solve problems every day for your clients, if you're dealing with clients, and you solve problems every day internally. I can't believe that all of you together, all this brain power put together in one room, can't solve this one issue that we've got. Yeah. We're a team. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. Probably it varies from situation to situation. Let's just, in any case, it takes two to fix this, so let's just work together on this. And then we started identifying patterns that were happening, avoiding any blaming language, and the situation was very, very productive. Also, I got them in a situation where they were forced to kind of contemplate the version of the other department. How do you think this thing that has happened, how do you think the other part of the room would have experienced it? Mm-hmm. And then got it to read the one department, read their version to the other department, and then to check their assumptions, and they realized that sometimes they were making huge assumptions. So I would really recommend that you treat this as a team issue. It's saying, well, it doesn't matter whose fault it is, the fact is that it keeps on happening, so let's fix it. And then try and foster autonomy into this person so that they can raise their hand before the real problem becomes bigger, and leave them some autonomy of how they are going to raise their hand, how they are going to raise the alarm.
We have another question. How do you handle an employee who's seeking your position, so therefore they highlight any and all issues made to your supervisor?
Gosh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Okay. Okay. Well, first of all, you need to protect your own self-esteem and your own self-worth, because it must be awful, because it must be like feeling that you're under attack. But remember, at the end of the day, you are the boss. So. Let's analyze what the animal part of you might say and what the human might say. Okay, so I've got Yanira and Henry here with me, so let's put them on the spot a little bit. So what do you think the animal, the chimp or the monkey, is saying to this person when the subordinate is criticizing them?
Basically, I'm your boss.
Yeah, shut up, I'm your boss. How dare you?
Yeah.
So you've got a voice saying, sack them.
That's your arrogant side.
Sack them, shoot them. Shut them out. It doesn't matter. Or make them feel bad.
Yeah.
You know, you've got calls to retaliate. It's like, how dare them? So I'm going to make them look bad, which of course is going to compound the situation. Okay, so the chimp is alerting you to a danger. The animal is alerting you to a danger, and it is true, there's a danger. But the way it wants to go about it is probably not very productive, which is to sack them or to make them look bad. Let's just think what the human might think with a little bit of perspective. What is the human saying?
Maybe sit down and have a conversation with them and see what...
Yeah, maybe we can sit down and have a conversation. Yeah. You don't need to be... not being the chimp or the animal doesn't mean that you have to be completely nice and understanding either. So there is an issue there, and it's an issue that perhaps needs to be coming to the fore. So you need to tell this person what is acceptable behavior within the team and what is unacceptable behavior.